welcome. Thanks for coming for today. And I have been attending your sessions, and I find that your session, very interesting, and is that helped me better understand and appreciate more about, the organization diagnosis. Can you share the story behind, your work? It's so innovative, how I see it. And what was your inspiration? how did you begin with your work?
It's interesting you call this innovation, and you find it different. In a matter of fact, it's, I think, a continuation of just good managerial practices. So the idea of design and management design, I think there are two sources that I can kind of recall where the idea actually came from. One is from one of my managers that always said at that time when I used to work for larger companies, says, you need to have some kind of a diagnostic tool in order to understand how our organization does. He actually says, as managers, we always have some kind of a twisted bias towards our own organization. So why don't we have some tool that helps us to get much more better data to understand how well we are doing here? And by pure coincidence, when I started my own consulting firm, I was extremely lucky to get the first client, which was the World Economic Forum. And they had a managerial issue they wanted me to help them solve. So what happened is that one day the chairman of the World Economic Forum just came into our office and said, look, can we have a talk tomorrow at 9 o'clock? I would like to know where you stand, what you do, and what you think about things here. And when someone like Professor Schwab comes into the room and asks you to do, you just do it. But on the other hand, you make sure that you have something extremely relevant to present such that you can make a difference to that organization. So we thought about what do we actually do 9 o'clock tomorrow? And suddenly towards the evening, we got the idea, says, well, actually, we don't need to present a solution. We need to create a conversation. So what we did is overnight, we sat down and I had an idea in my mind to create 7 posters with questions on it, okay? And essentially start the meeting by asking the attendees to just go through those questions. And this is exactly what we did. So that morning at 9 o'clock, first of all, we had a bit puzzled eyes. Why do we now need to go through questions, flip chart things here? That was immediately solved here. We started taking the pen, started looking at the questions, and started answering it. And the funny thing is, the meeting was scheduled for 3/4 of an hour, and 3 hours later, we were essentially standing here at question number 3 out of about 57. And they were disagreeing on the responses to some of these questions. And he said, cool, we now had an excellent conversation over the last 3 hours. I see very clear in my mind what we need to do. And I looked at him and said, well, we haven't really started yet. He says, no, it's all good, it's all fine here. So that meeting ended up in a very different way, but in a very positive way, that just kind of a couple of nights later, it dawned on me that apparently we have done something which is kind of obvious, but you first have to have the idea to create a conversation that is very meaningful for leaders. And apparently we were able to do that. So we said, look, we have a cool tool, so let's put this into a very professional type of a diagnostic tool that helps leaders to have an intelligent conversation. So that was the beginning 15 years ago with what we call today the Agility Insights Diagnostic. Yeah, so it's quite simple.
When do you think that it's a good timing to start using it?
Yeah. Let me maybe start with explaining what this is all about. It's a couple of pieces to it. One is what we call a diagnostic tool that helps executive teams to understand what management is all about. So you create that conversation that I was just talking about here. The other thing is a is a model which we call the performance triangle. And that's the model we use in order to organize all the variables, all the questions around it, but also the thinking around it, okay? And the third thing is what we call management design. That's a methodology on how to apply the diagnostic in a executive, top executive context here. So there are many situations where our clients have used this in the past. One is, for example, an executive transition. So let's just assume as a CEO, you start the first day in your new company, and normally what you're saying, you have 100 days to find out, okay, what it is all about the organization here. With our methodology, we can help you to sort out the issues in the organization within a couple of days. So within a couple of days, you have a clarity that allows you then to systematically address some of those issues. So that's one instance. Another one is M&A transactions. You have two companies that want to get together. You have to make a decision on what management tools, systems, processes, procedures do you take from what kind of a company here. Those that do it well, they diagnose that stuff first, and then you have a facts-based to choose from here. Before you make any major move, be it to tackle a new challenge and a higher challenge, a transformation program, it's good to just sit back and have a conversation about how do you actually manage that thing here. So we create a platform in that sense that allows an executive team to have an intelligent conversation about our ability to manage a big project, big transformation, big program.
Who do you think that they could use this management design? I mean, should it always be the senior management, or who else that in the organization should be a part of?
So most of the time, I have to go back to very practical client cases here. Most of the time it was the executive team that manages an organization. Now in larger organizations, let's say multinational organizations, that might be a country organization. It might be sales, it may be marketing, but it's always the one function or the one unit that has a task to get something done. So that is the most important thing, that you look for that unit. Then you include, depending on the challenges, you include the entire executive team, maybe all managers, maybe all supervisors, maybe all employees in that unit. We have a business case in the US with a larger city where we included every employee in the survey here. And this was actually highly successful because we were able to show opinions of employees versus opinions of supervisors versus the opinions of an executive team. So you kind of put this next to each other and you can see what people are saying. So you get a far more refined analysis and point of view here.
Okay.
So it depends very much on the challenges that you want to tackle here.
Sure. So I guess as, after 15 years until now, you have the consolidate extensive data, and you basically have a chance to see what's happening in different organizations, different industry, different countries. Based on your observation, what are the common trends? What is the most issue or the possibility that you see that organization should focus more?
It's so if I look at over those 15 years here, there are two main observations that kind of stick out. Okay, the first observation is that there are very few management teams in the world that take time once a day or half a day per year to sit down and think about how they actually manage the organization. They're very busy in actually managing what we call work in the system, so using all the tools and everything. They're very good at that. However, they hardly ever take time for that specific reflection. That's where we come in and say, look, let's take time, reflect on things, and take a pause, and then take on the next big challenges. So that's one big learning. Very few organizations take the luxury of doing that. The second thing is when we look at the performance triangle with culture, leadership and systems, what we are seeing is that whenever there is something wrong in a company, companies are very ready to embark executives in some kind of executive development program here. So they do leadership development. Now, what we are saying is, wait, unless you have resolved some of the systems in an organization, some of the way you manage the organization, if you have eliminated some of the viruses, your executive development doesn't actually do much good, because what you do on a Monday morning, after the executive development program, you come back into the same company and you still find the company being the same. So nothing really changes here. This is why every intervention, successful interventions we look at, they always start by building the system first, thinking about management and how to do it, and then do some intelligent executive education along that. That's much more successful.
Okay. So that sounds a lot like the organization development and plus
very
management.
Much so. Yeah. It's just reality in companies is sometimes very different here. Okay. And the amount of investments going into leadership development is 100,000 times the time, the effort that is being spent on building good management systems.
Okay. So my last question now for today is that do you have some examples, some of your client feedback that what did they say about your management design, what impact, your work have on them?
So another example is that I can think of right now is a food company that produces specialty food. It's a SME type firm that was very successful in the past 25 years, managed by its founder and owner and inventor of the specialty foods that they're producing here. And the challenge we were asked to help them with is to transition from what's called, owner-dominated or inventor-dominated management style to putting in a management team that will actually successfully manage that company in the future here. So we used our diagnostic tool to help them understand what kind of tools, routines, processes you actually need in order to successfully manage a firm. So we helped them to make that transition from the dominant owner to a productive executive team in a much faster way. So within 2-3 months, they were extremely productive. We had built all the infrastructure around it here. And even today, 2-3 years after, we have helped them with the intervention. They are growing amazingly here. So those are 2 examples of how we actually use the methodology, not just to design management, but to solve real business problems here. Okay.
So I think that I'm going to wrap up here, and Lucas Michael, definitely he is the author of the management design, and as you heard from him already that as long as you believe that you are the chain leader, chain manager, you can always use this management design to help improve organization. Thank you.